When the Hamfest first began, they did not want to charge a registration fee, but to generate some money for letters and stamps to notify the clubs, and later a few gifts for bingo, they decided that the hams bring some valuable ham gear that they thought perhaps they could live without, but might enrich another ham's life, and they would hold an auction, the first one being in 1939 with Art Dunkel, W7AQK, from Kellogg, Idaho, the first auctioneer. The second auction in 1940 was by Walter Partlow, W7FGZ. Then for many years Don Ross, IBG, did the honors as auctioneer. In 1939, Glenn Davis, W7EKX, came to the Hamfest, but not having any ham gear for the auction, he donated a bottle of Olympia beer. Mace Reed, W7GUJ, bought it for 75 cents. In 1940, he returned the unopened bottle to be auctioned off again. Speed Horton, salesman for Spokane Radio Company, bought it for $1 and promised to bring it back the next year. In 1957, a group of hams bought it collectively for $14.80. In 1958, the bottle generated $22.90. In 1959, $62.19. 1960, $80.43. 1962, $76.17. 1964, $73.38. 1966, $87.07. 1967, $144.78. And 1970, $128.05. This money was raised by passing the hat for a Chinese auction, so when time was called, whoever had made the last donation in the hat won the bottle for that year. It must be returned the following year.
The price of the beer bottle auction becomes even more relevant when you convert the amounts to today's equivalent value. That first beer bottle auction of 75 cents would equal $11.63 in 2008. Quite a bit of money in 1939 for someone to shell out for a bottle of Olympia beer. And our statistics show that the best year for the beer bottle auction was 1981, when it sold for $171.22. Today's equivalent, $405.41. The 1967 beer bottle auction is the standout when it sold for $144.78. Today, that would equal $933.28. And now let's get back to our story as told by Ann Jocks, W7BOZ's XYL.
During the war, I don't think the Canadians could come down, and the hams were not allowed to operate their rigs, and most of the young men went to war. But a few of the older fellows did have meetings again the third weekend in July in the park in the war years of 1942, 43, 44, and 45, and in 1946 they again had a Hamfest at Two Medicine. At that meeting they voted to have the 1947 Hamfest at Waterton Lakes in Canada. My twins were born that year, so I did not go, but Art and Walt Lundy, W7BUJ, went. It poured rain that whole weekend, and when they came home Sunday, they looked like drowned rats and everything was soaked. They were quite a sorry sight. At this Hamfest, it was suggested that the Hamfest be organized in the form of an association, and as a result, a committee was appointed to draw up a constitution and bylaws to be presented at the Hamfest in 1948. I think that it was also at this time that the name Two Medicine Glacier Park Hamfest be changed to the Glacier-Waterton Lakes International Hamfest. Ray Frett's W7DSS was the main instigator in drawing up the drafts for the Constitution and bylaws.
In 1959, Dr. J.J. Dobry, VE6DR, wrote this in a Canadian amateur radio newsletter. My association with the Hamfest started in 1946 when it was held at Two Medicine in Glacier National Park that year. A short time prior to this, by special acts of the Canadian and U.S. governments, the Waterton Parks and Glacier Parks were consolidated into one and named, by request of the U.S. government, the Glacier-Waterton International Peace Park. While the park was considered as one, each country was to continue the administration of its own section. I believe it is important that you should know that the correct title of the park is Glacier-Waterton International Peace Park, because it has a great deal to do with what happened in 1946 and since that time. As the Hamfest was held in an international peace park, I thought it might be a good idea to have the Hamfest held occasionally in the Canadian section of the park, namely Waterton. This matter was brought up at the meeting at Two Medicine and received unanimous approval. Also, because the previous Hamfest had no specific name, it was decided that we constitute the Glacier-Waterton International Peace Park Hamfest Association. The sole purpose of this organization was to put on a Hamfest within the boundaries of the Waterton Glacier Parks once each year. Dr. J.J. Dobry, VE6DR.
In 1954, the Hamfest was held in Waterton Lakes, and we went with all our children. That was also the year that I decided the wind blew harder up there than it did in Great Falls. We camped at the edge of the lake, and as I was getting supper, the wind blew so hard it blew our tent right on top of me. So we picked everything up bodily and moved it as far back from the lake as we could to again erect our tent to spend the night. Another year in Waterton it snowed, but on Sunday when we left, the sun came out, and by the time we got to the border, the only snow left was in the borrow pits. Now that I think of it, we have had a lot of cold, rainy, or snowy weather the third weekend in July, and I also remember that that was the only time of the year that I ever wore flannel pajamas. When we started going to Apgar Campground at Lake McDonald, which was probably around 1955, 1958, 1959, we thoroughly enjoyed being there because it was such an ideal spot for the children. They would play in the lake because it was so shallow near the shore. They swam along the shore instead of out in the middle, then they were fairly safe. But we women did our visiting down by the water just to be on the safe side. However, one day, I guess we talked too much because suddenly we looked up and here were two Jock's children, BOZ's youngsters, two Lundy twins, BUJ's children, and Julie Peck, W7DCG's girl, all on a huge log happily paddling out to sea. We frantically hailed them back to shore, none the worse for the wear, except for a few mothers that nearly had heart attacks. The children were in the water so much that we had them wear t-shirts and long pants in the water, but they still burned through their clothes. Not bad, but they still turned pink.